Shannon, well, it's lovely to meet you. Thank you so much for being here. I have to say that Dying for Sex is one of my new favorite shows of the year. And I'd actually been revisiting it several times since its initial release, partly because it hits pretty close to home. I lost my dad to cancer 2 years ago, and the show has really become this kind of feel-good comfort watch, given the very grounded and fearless approach to death and cancer, and I think navigating that as a loved one. And I love that it's also a story about a woman who is exploring intimacy and figuring out what her desires are and how she wants to be loved. And so there's a lot to dive into here. So I'm curious to know what themes jumped out at you initially when you stepped into this project as an EP and director. What drew you to Kim and Liz's writing?
Oh, well, I mean, firstly, Kim and Liz are two of the wittiest, brilliant writers in television. So it was easy to be drawn to the extraordinary writing for sure. Thematically, look, I mean, I made a film several years ago called Baby Teeth, which was, had some similar themes in terms of sort of living your life to the fullest towards the end of your time, and also just sort of being bold and brave and stripping all those layers away when you're facing the greatest existential crisis of your life. And sort of getting people to hopefully reflect on themselves and like wonder why we don't live honestly all the time and why it takes such a serious diagnosis to kind of do that. Yeah, and it's the exquisite tension in the tone of it that I love too, of the sort of brutal honesty and the heartbreak. And I love things that are really tonally challenging. So that's what drew me to it. Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking to that tonal challenge, that the blend of humor and tragedy here is really terrific, and you get this the quirkiness, the nuance of the characters and the story. Could you talk a bit about setting that tone in episode one in particular, and what were some of the markers in terms of maintaining that throughout episodes 4 to 8?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question because obviously, the pilot actually has, I think, a really beautiful mix of the two, but you do have to really get that tone right at the beginning because obviously making jokes about cancer could be considered really quite off if you don't get it right. And it's really interesting, two beautiful actresses who are known for quite different things. Obviously, Michelle's so well known for her extraordinary work in like Blue Valentine and Manchester by the Sea and these extraordinary dramatic performances. And then you've got Jenny Slate, who's an amazing actress, but also a stand-up comedian. And it's about drawing these two other sides of those performers, which they have in there, but people have seen less of. So for Jenny, it was pulling more of the kind of whirlpool of emotion that she has underneath all her humor. And, for Michelle, it was getting into her physical comedy, which she is a very physical performer anyway, but pulling out sort of she's got a great goofy sense of humor, which I loved, and sort of amping that and giving, everyone the confidence to really fly in the other area that they don't get to play in as much, really. And I guess starting by nailing that kind of tone in the pilot. And then it's really interesting because in 2 and 3, it sort of drifts into more, I would say, heavier comedy area, which is really important to kind of explore her sexuality, but always in a really honest and grounded way. And then by 4, we sort of really explode into the world of the sex party, and lots of things are starting to align more in Molly's mind about what she wants to really pursue. And then I would say the second half starts to have more of a melancholic tone as we sort of draw closer to the end of her life without, losing those great moments of laughter and lightness. And I really feel like this kind of work, to me, is a much more honest representation of people's experience of life and death. And so that's why I'm always trying to come back to what is the honest thing to play in this moment, and how can we push it further than we've ever seen it before, or try something we haven't seen before. It's always about not doing what we already know.
Yes, absolutely. It definitely felt refreshing in that way. And what I think episode 1 also does really well is establishing the narrative focus on Molly's agency. We know firsthand or from the get-go that this is her life, it's her death, and it's her desire that really leads the story, which your direction really visualizes that so well, especially in episode 4, for example, when Molly learns how to submit sexually and stay present, when she's doing the breathing exercise with her doctor. And I wanted to know, could you speak a bit more about depicting Molly's agency and what you wanted that to kind of look like on screen?
Yeah, it was really important that she didn't just feel like a patient or a victim, or that all these things were just happening to her,
Yeah.
and that you could tell that she was, like you're saying, having agency and taking control of her life. But she's also learning. And, what I love about doing projects and why I kind of jump at them is when there's topics that I don't know as well and I have to suddenly learn about. Like, I didn't know as much about butt plugs and cock cages as I do now, and I didn't know as much about the details of the Dom culture. And I loved all that. And so, Michelle is such an incredibly studious, craft-driven performer. So she was also so detailed in her knowledge of it. And yeah, we just really wanted to make sure that that community of people who, explored different kind of sex and kink and all of that felt seen, and also that it felt natural, like it's a bit clunky sometimes as you're trying to muddle your way through it, or it actually can sometimes feel so much more emotional or exposing or a vibrant than you ever anticipated. So it was just really capturing the honesty of all those moments. And, having a wonderful intimacy coordinator on set also helps with that at times. But yeah, it was just really constructing a true version of all of that for Molly. And obviously we had this extraordinary real life story as well, and podcast that we were drawing from. And so both physically on set, we had the real Nikki Boyer, and then metaphysically on set, we had Molly's presence. And so it was always trying to honor that without not also being a true adaptation and having the creative freedom of doing that. I think the reason why it feels so powerful to people is it is its own it's its own art form. It's not the podcast. It's not a documentary, but we, I think really distilled it to its essence of the meaning of connection.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking more to that podcast, of course, Molly and Nikki's friendship is an enormous part of the story. And we get that again from the beginning in episode 1. We know right away that, okay, Molly can lean on Nikki for anything and Nikki will always be there. And speaking of the podcast as well, I'm curious how insightful that was for you going into it. Were there certain elements about the podcast or even their friendship in general that you wanted to felt like to emphasize, or maybe needed a different or a deeper exploration on screen?
Look, to be honest, I always I look at the source material, but I do not go too deep into it because I don't want to become too attached to it, because at the end of the day, I'm working with a new creation, and so I do worry that I will get too attached to the original. So I listened to it, but I didn't become obsessed with any elements of it, other than, of course, their rich and glorious friendship and their humor, and Michelle was really specific and detailed about having her voice start to deteriorate in the same way that Molly's did. And I thought that was really interesting as a character choice to commit to that. And that felt powerful, especially in the last ep. Sort of hearing that felt really full on, because it did feel like Molly was there with us in the room.
Yeah. Absolutely. And speaking to that last episode, one of my favorite scenes is when Molly has her vision in the hospital room, and that room it becomes alive with stuff flying from the walls and the hospital bed spinning. A powerful moment of clarity as well for the character, and how time really is a circle in that context. And it also felt incredibly experimental as well. So I wanted to know, what was the energy like in the room when you were filming that moment? And what were some of the logistics behind getting the shots? Because it looked like there was a choreography to it, and it was it was very exhilarating to watch. It was great.
Yeah, look, I was very lucky. I got to work with a cinematographer I did a show called Dave with, called Brian Lannon. And when we were talking about the unlinking and how to represent that, he said, let's pull her bed out and start spinning her around and try and kind of do it as one shot. And I said, great, because I come from theater originally, and so did Liz and Kim. So I was like we're basically going to create a musical moment. And they were like, yes. And so Kim got her friends to write some music. I said we need a day of rehearsal. I was like, we need puppeteers. They're going to have to fly things in. They were all sitting on little butt dollies, which are little, bits of wood with the wheels on them swinging around. And all the actors were doing it for real. Jay Duplass, Sissy Spacek flying in and out. And it was just amazing. Confetti cannons, David Rashi singing jazz, Esco Jule pulling a butt plug out of her mouth, and juggling dildos. It was so much fun, but it was a massive thing to choreograph. And luckily, the producers and everyone gave me all the time to do it and get it right. And, we laughed a lot that day getting it, perfect, but it is a very technical thing. I'm on a megaphone sort of yelling out all the different cue points. I mean, one of my favorite moments was saying, penis fly closer to Michelle and go off to the left, and just crazy things that you're having to do. And, the dog face come in and now exit. And, it's like orchestrating a musical. And, but I do love those challenges. I think I've been, doing television for a while now. And so any opportunity to kind of really bring in something really heightened and theatrical that really matches the experience of the character is very fun and exciting to me. And music is a huge part of my work too. So I really enjoyed trying to capture the trippy nature of experiencing the unlinking as had been described to us by people who, had experienced that before death. It's something I also didn't know about. So that was the other exciting thing, again, to learn about the unlinking. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the great things that this show I feel does is it does feel like a sense of discovery. Every episode, you feel like you've learned some kind of new insight into what these experiences are. And, speaking more to the theatricality of it, there's so much movement in a lot of the episodes as well. In episode 6, for example, we learn about dance as a powerful tool of expression for the cancer group. And they're trying to find where their fear lives in their bodies and moving based on words in their journals. So it had this incredible rhythm to it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think, often, there are elements that people could read on the page and think are just funny or slapstick or cheesy. And I'm like, and I never want to do that kind of work. And Kim and Liz also, really let me sort of protect that. And with Molly's final dance, it was so important to me that it was really profound and felt incredibly raw and open and alive from Michelle. And so we worked with a choreographer, but I didn't want it to feel choreographed. So there were just a few moves that Michelle learned that felt really very Molly for her. And then on the day, we did it a few times. And I remember thinking, gosh, it looks amazing, but it's still not fully unlocked. And Michelle was amazing. I said to her, look, I think we just got to really have a complete sense of abandonment. And I called out when maybe the move should change. Once I feel like she'd really gone there and I could feel it sort of being electric through the screen, I would call for the next move to happen. And I remember that final take was so moving. I was in tears just watching her, but she had really lost herself in it and captured something very special. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it really speaks to Michelle as well. I mean, she has this gift of just making acting look effortless. It's kind of like a magic trick, and it just, it feels so natural.
Yeah, she's extraordinarily intelligent, and she has been honing her craft for a long time, and she still feels like someone who is so excited by it, and wanting to constantly learn and push herself, and she's probably the most intelligent actress I've ever worked with. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, I was listening to what you said about that final dance and the final moment. And, when I think about episodes 1 and 8 side by side, it's such a testament to how emotionally fulfilling this story was to follow, this journey, both thematically and visually. And I'm curious to know, when you were moving from one episode to another, as Molly's character was becoming more experimental, more outspoken in her desires, did that inspire you to kind of, think about new things as a director? I'm curious to know what your biggest takeaway was from the journey that we go on with this character.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me it was really important that, it's interesting because obviously design-wise, I mean, with Michael Bricker was our designer, who's brilliant, but it's very challenging to do work that is very much set in hospitals and hospital rooms and hospice rooms. And it was really important to me that that final episode, which is almost entirely shot in one room, felt like a beautiful, peaceful, vibrant place. I think it's easy to see a kind of more depressing or muted blue tones and all this. And I remember Michael and I talking very clearly about sort of wanting sort of peach tones and lilac, and to keep it not that kind of stereotypical look that you expect in it. And, that's true as well, that people often bring in beautiful elements and try and make it feel like a home, and
Mm.
all those details. And, I think as well, it's interesting because then when they go into Molly's, bath at the end, there was something also really amazing about surrendering to a look that was a bit more medical, but still felt like her attempt at a kind of last 1 second. Sorry, someone is at my door and my daughter's here. 1 second.
Oh yeah, no worries.
Oh, apologies. I don't know how you edit that, but I'm a mom, so my 9-year-old just had to go get the door, and I was like,
No worries.
Anyway. Do you want to do that question again? What did you ask? I can't remember.
Oh, we were talking about oh goodness, what I'm trying to think of the original question. Okay.
Oh, the sort of visual journey from 1 to 8.
Yeah.
It's interesting too, I guess, because everywhere I tend to shoot something, I'm an outsider because I'm obviously Australian. And being in New York, what was amazing was, in so many ways, like visually, it was also sort of a love letter to, Brooklyn, and sort of anytime we got to go outside, it was really important that that felt really honest. And I guess as well, sort of going from sort of outside expansive shots to towards the end becoming quite claustrophobic in many ways, and sort of interior. It was important that it felt like this kind of cocoon where these people were sort of held by, these extraordinary medical professionals and each other's love for one another. And visually, we were really trying to do that also with the lighting, but also have loads of fun like we did with the rally, with them dancing around and having sort of softer tones in that. But I found the look of that bath scene, really, really interesting, because it did look quite medical, but at the same time it felt really beautiful. And I love that mix of sort of the pink and blue hues with the incredible pain that Molly was feeling in her moment of deciding she needed to let go. Yeah.
And just thinking about that, in addition to the exteriors, we do see a lot of what's going on in Molly's head, particularly regarding her childhood trauma, and in particular the visions of her younger self, the visions of the faceless man who had abused her. I was wondering, what were those conversations like around depicting that on screen? Because it felt like it was handled in a very delicate and very respectful way.
Yeah, back to your question as well about agency. It was really important to me that because we were dealing with something that involved something as serious as sexual abuse, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't just this sort of scary presence, and that she could kind of gain back her power over the situation by we put a body rig on Michelle, so that when she started feeling like she was dissociating, you could really feel that as the audience, and as she was trying to run away from him. But then at the same time, she could hold it and take control of the camera herself, which is what she starts to do more as she becomes stronger throughout the story. And that's also, a very kind of Brechtian breaking the fourth wall technique, which I also used with Molly when she looks to camera at times, which I just always find really powerful, because it allows the audience to both intellectualize and feel emotionally connected, but it doesn't make you just get sucked into. I don't like anything that's too manipulative. I want the audience to kind of always be aware that they're in charge of their journey. They're not just, being handheld the whole time.
Absolutely. And it's visualized in such a powerful and resonating way. And I know we've got just a few more minutes together, but my last question kind of goes back to the beginning in some ways, because my introduction to your work was with Baby Teeth, which was absolutely brilliant and also balances the weight of serious themes, I feel, with a lot of nuance and a grounded sense of humor, which you've achieved with Dying for Sex as well. And both of those projects continue to expand conversations around death, and particularly through characters who want to be defined beyond their illness, which is so incredible to see on screen. And I was wondering, what do you hope audiences can learn from getting these more open, more grounded depictions of death?
Look, I mean, I think we've sort of been approaching death, I guess I would say incorrectly, for quite a long time, you know. We sort of hide it. There's an amazing book called Smoke Gets in Your Eyes that I read several years ago about a young gal who started out working in the crematorium world at a very young age, and started to see how we were hiding death all the time, and how in hospitals often when you see just an empty sort of bed underneath, there can often be transporting a dead body because they don't want anyone to see that, because they're in the industry of life, not death. And I think the more we sort of look at it in the face and, you know, give ourselves the chance to say goodbye to people properly and the chance to grieve people properly. Like, you don't have to get a body sent off the moment somebody passes away. You can have it in your house. You can have everybody come and, bathe the body and spend time with it and share stories with it. And I just think it's really important. There's a beautiful Australian documentary called Tender that I love that also explores this. And, it's definitely happening more. You hear a lot of people talking about death doulas and things now. But for me, it's about people really talking about it more and paying attention to it and setting things up. Like, everyone should be talking to their parents if they're aging about what they want. And, why not say those things that you would say at their eulogy now? I think it's just important to stop being so afraid to live your life, fearlessly. I think we'd all benefit a lot from it. Yeah.
Well, what an incredible note to end on. Shannon, this was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat today. I could have spoken for hours about this series. There's so much to talk about, and there's so much that resonates beyond the credits. So thank you for your work, and I cannot wait to see what you do next as well.
Oh, thank you so much for your brilliant questions. That was very nice.
It's my pleasure. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.